Hey everyone, this is not just a story, this is a reckoning. Before the world had time to doubt, before critics sharpened their opinions, before anyone could say it wouldn't work, this journey had already begun. If you believe in stories where power rises from pressure, where faith outpaces fear, and where a black queen builds her throne from scraps the world overlooked, then stay right here. Take a moment to like this story, subscribe for more truths they never taught us to expect, and welcome to Black Queen Dominion, where silence turns into strategy and survival becomes supremacy. This story began with a single dollar. Not a metaphorical dollar. Not a symbolic idea of poverty or struggle. One real, thin, nearly weightless dollar that carried the full weight of generations of doubt. It rested in a palm that had been told repeatedly that greatness required resources, connections, permission, and luck. None of those things were present. What was present was hunger, not for money but for proof. Proof that discipline could outperform despair. Proof that clarity could outwork chaos. Proof that even when the world places a queen on the lowest square of the board, she still moves like royalty. The dollar came from the bottom of a bag, folded, forgotten, and slightly worn. It represented the end of options. There were no backup plans hiding behind it. No safety net beneath it. This was not a game of abundance pretending to be struggle. This was real scarcity, real stakes, and real consequences. That dollar was not special because of its value. It was special because it was the last one that existed without purpose. The environment surrounding that moment was quiet in a way that only happens when dreams feel risky. There was no cheering crowd. No applause. Only the sound of thoughts competing with fear. Bills waited patiently. Time pressed relentlessly. Society whispered its familiar message that effort without capital was foolish. But something else whispered louder. A reminder that every empire starts as an idea, and every idea begins small enough to be ignored. That dollar became a decision. It was not spent impulsively. It was studied. It was respected. It was treated as seed, not currency. The mind behind it shifted from survival thinking to strategy thinking. Instead of asking how to spend it, the focus became how to multiply it. Instead of chasing fast results, patience entered the room. Instead of comparing timelines to others, the queen chose to compare effort only to herself. The first move was not glamorous. It did not look like success. It looked like preparation. Research replaced scrolling. Observation replaced envy. The world was watched carefully. What people needed, what they complained about, what they underestimated. Patterns emerged. Opportunities hid in plain sight. The queen noticed something most overlooked. Small problems are everywhere and people will always pay for solutions that save time, dignity, or peace of mind. That dollar was exchanged for something simple, something most would laugh at. But laughter has never been the enemy of progress. Disbelief has. What mattered was that the dollar transformed from paper into possibility. It entered circulation with intention. Every step was tracked. Every result was studied. Mistakes were not mourned, they were measured. The early returns were small. Painfully small. Coins instead of bills. Numbers that would embarrass anyone chasing overnight success. But those returns carried something priceless. Confirmation. Confirmation that movement was possible. Confirmation that effort produced feedback. Confirmation that the system responded when engaged intelligently. Momentum did not arrive loudly. It arrived quietly like confidence. The queen did not announce progress. She did not seek validation. She refined her approach. Adjusted her timing. Learned where to push and where to wait. She understood something many never do, that growth is not about force but alignment. While others slept, she planned. While others complained, she executed. While others waited for permission, she created her own structure. The dollar became 5. The 5 became 10. The 10 became something else entirely, a mindset shift. The number mattered less than the direction. Forward. Resistance appeared quickly. Doubt tried to reclaim its territory. Old voices resurfaced, reminding her of statistics and ceilings and probabilities. But statistics do not account for obsession. Ceilings do not stop those willing to build staircases. Probability bends when discipline refuses to quit. This chapter of the story is not about wealth yet. It is about identity. The moment when a woman stops seeing herself as someone trying to escape struggle and starts seeing herself as someone building power. That transition is invisible to the outside world but seismic on the inside. The queen no longer chased money. She chased mastery. Every small win strengthened belief. Every setback sharpened skill. The dollar had officially outgrown its original form. It now lived as momentum, as proof, as fuel. Something irreversible had begun. As this chapter closes, understand this. The world still did not notice. No headlines appeared. No congratulations arrived. But that is how true rises begin. Quietly, deliberately, without permission. The board was set. The queen had made her opening move. And the dollar? It was no longer just money. It was a warning. The next chapter begins where patience turns into pressure, and pressure begins to reveal power. What followed that first move was not instant transformation but accumulation. The kind that happens slowly enough to test faith and fast enough to demand focus. Chapter 2 begins at the moment when effort stopped feeling symbolic and started feeling heavy. The dollar had already changed form, but now the weight of expectation arrived. Because once proof exists, excuses lose their shelter. The queen woke each day aware that momentum is fragile. Early growth can disappear just as quickly as it appears if attention slips. There was no room for casual action anymore. Every decision mattered more because the system was working, quietly, steadily, undeniably. The smallest habits began to carry oversized consequences. Time became currency. Energy became sacred. Distractions were treated like threats. The queen learned that growth does not demand constant motion. It demands consistent direction. She narrowed her focus, choosing depth over noise. Instead of chasing 10 ideas poorly, she committed to one idea fully. This was the difference between movement and progress. Money trickled in, uneven but encouraging. Some days rewarded effort. Others returned silence. The emotional discipline required during those silent days was greater than during wins. It was easy to believe in the system when results appeared. It was harder, but more important, to believe when nothing showed up except the work itself. This was where many quit. Not because failure overwhelmed them but because boredom and doubt teamed up quietly. The queen felt that pressure too. The temptation to abandon the plan for something flashier crept in. But she understood a dangerous truth. Quitting does not always feel like defeat. Sometimes it feels like relief. And relief is the enemy of legacy. So she stayed. She refined the process again. Improved efficiency. Cut waste. Studied feedback without emotion. Numbers were no longer just income, they were information. Each increase revealed what worked. Each dip revealed what didn't. Instead of reacting, she responded. Strategy replaced impulse. The environment around her still hadn't changed. Bills still waited. Responsibilities still demanded attention. Support was still minimal. But internally something was different. The queen had crossed into a space where she trusted herself more than circumstances. That trust became armor. The money grew incrementally. 10s turned into 20s. 20s learned how to stack. It was not life-changing yet, but it was direction-changing. The queen saw patterns emerging. Peak times, high-value actions, low-return distractions. She learned where her effort multiplied and where it evaporated. Confidence followed competence. Not loud confidence. Quiet certainty. The kind that doesn't announce itself but alters posture, pace, and presence. The queen no longer rushed. She moved with intention. Every action was connected to a larger plan. Then came the first real test. An unexpected setback arrived, uninvited and disruptive. A loss that wiped out days of progress in a single moment. It felt unfair. It felt discouraging. It felt personal. For a brief moment the old voice returned, whispering that this was proof it wouldn't last. That the climb was temporary. That the ceiling was real. But the queen did not panic. Instead she paused. She reviewed what happened. She isolated the error, not to punish herself but to prevent repetition. This moment became a turning point. Because resilience is not proven when things go right, but when they go wrong and you stay focused anyway. She adjusted again. This adjustment marked a shift from beginner to builder. The queen stopped operating from hope and started operating from structure. She implemented safeguards. Backups. Systems that could absorb mistakes without collapsing. This is where many stories fail to go but where real power is forged, in boring, disciplined infrastructure. Progress resumed. Faster this time. Stronger. Smarter. The money returned not in dramatic leaps, but in steady gains that built confidence through repetition. What once felt fragile now felt dependable. The queen learned to trust the process because she had stress-tested it. Externally, people began to notice subtle changes. Not success, yet, but seriousness, focus, consistency. The way she spoke about time. The way she guarded her energy. The way she stopped explaining herself. These changes often confuse others before they inspire them. The dollar that started everything now existed only as memory. Its influence remained, though, shaping every choice. It reminded her that beginnings do not define endings, but they do define mindset. And mindset determines scale. As this chapter draws to a close, the queen stands at a new threshold. No longer at the starting line, but not yet at the summit. The climb has proven possible. The system has proven real. The question ahead is no longer, can this work? The question now is, how far can discipline take her? By the time this chapter begins, something fundamental has shifted. The queen is no longer testing a theory. She is operating inside a proven rhythm. What once required intense effort now flows with practiced ease. The system she built is no longer fragile. It is responsive. It bends without breaking. It learns. It adapts. And most importantly, it compounds. This is the stage where growth stops asking for permission. Consistency has a strange effect on reality. At first, it feels like shouting into the void. But over time, reality starts shouting back. The queen noticed that her actions now produced predictable outcomes. When she showed up fully, results followed. When she optimized one area, the impact echoed elsewhere. The process was no longer linear. It was exponential. Money began arriving faster than before. Not in bursts of luck, but as a consequence of alignment. Each dollar that entered circulation was immediately assigned a role. Nothing sat idle. Nothing was wasted. Capital, no matter how small, was treated as workforce. Every unit had a job. Every job had accountability. The queen's relationship with money had transformed. It was no longer emotional. It was functional. She no longer chased it or feared it. She directed it. This shift alone separated her from the majority of people still trapped in reaction cycles. Control had replaced chaos. Time compression followed. What once took weeks now took days. What once took days now took hours. This is the power of repetition combined with awareness. The queen didn't just work harder, she worked cleaner. Errors reduced. Decisions sharpened. Confidence eliminated hesitation. But acceleration always attracts resistance. As momentum grew, so did external noise. Opinions surfaced. Doubt from others disguised itself as concern. The queen became aware of an uncomfortable truth. Some people are more threatened by growth than they ever were by struggle. Her rising pace disrupted expectations. She was no longer following the script assigned to her. Instead of slowing down, she withdrew inward. Focus tightened. Circles narrowed. Energy became guarded like treasure. The queen understood that acceleration requires isolation, not loneliness but selective engagement. Not everyone deserves access to a growing mind. The money crossed a new psychological boundary. Not enough to declare victory, but enough to demand respect. Enough to erase the narrative of luck. Enough to silence internal doubt permanently. The queen could now trace her progress through data, not emotion. She began reinvesting with intention. Scaling not through reckless expansion but through strategic amplification. What worked received more resources. What didn't was cut without sentiment. This was not cruelty. This was leadership. Fatigue appeared, not physical but mental. Sustained focus at this level demanded recovery. The queen learned another advanced lesson. Rest is not weakness when used intentionally. She scheduled pauses. Protected her clarity. Because burnout destroys more empires than failure ever could. Then came the moment where speed met risk. A larger opportunity appeared. One that required commitment beyond comfort. One that demanded trust in the system rather than attachment to safety. The queen studied it carefully. This was not impulse. This was calculated courage. She moved forward. The result was not instant reward. It was tension. Uncertainty returned briefly. But this time it did not feel threatening. It felt familiar. The queen recognized it as growth pressure. A sign that expansion was underway. When the return arrived, it confirmed what discipline had promised. The numbers jumped. Not dramatically but decisively. The kind of increase that changes posture. That alters self-perception. That announces internally, You are no longer building survival. You are building legacy. Externally, validation began trickling in. Quiet acknowledgement. Subtle respect. But the queen did not slow down to accept applause. She understood something critical. Acceleration is dangerous when ego enters the driver's seat. So she stayed grounded. The journey was no longer about proving others wrong. It was about proving herself consistent, repeatable, scalable, unstoppable. As this chapter closes, the queen stands closer to the milestone than ever before. The system is humming. The numbers are aligning. The doubt has lost its voice. What remains now is the final transformation, where belief turns into undeniable proof. Chapter 4 opens in a dangerous place. Not at the beginning and not at the finish, but in between. This is the territory where many strong journeys collapse. Not because of lack, but because of proximity. Being close to a breakthrough creates a pressure unlike anything before it. The queen could feel it in every decision. The margin for error had narrowed. Every move now carried amplified consequence. The system was working at full capacity. Money flowed more consistently, but with consistency came responsibility. What once felt exciting now felt serious. The queen was no longer experimenting. She was managing momentum, managing risk, managing herself. The psychological shift from builder to steward began here. There was temptation to celebrate early, to relax standards, to assume the hardest part was over. But the queen understood a hard truth. Almost there is more dangerous than nowhere. Because almost there invites complacency disguised as confidence. So she tightened discipline instead of loosening it. Every process was reviewed. Every assumption questioned. She audited her habits the way others audit finances. Anything that did not contribute to forward motion was removed. Ruthlessly, quietly, without apology. Fatigue resurfaced heavier this time. Not exhaustion from effort but from responsibility. Growth had expanded her mental load. More decisions. More monitoring. More awareness required. This was leadership pressure, the cost of scale. The queen responded by upgrading her mindset again. She stopped doing everything herself. Not physically handing tasks to others, but mentally letting go of micromanagement. Systems were trusted. Structure replaced constant oversight. This freed her focus for strategy instead of survival. Numbers climbed closer to the mark. Not yet 4 digits but close enough to taste. Each increase intensified awareness. The queen felt the gravity of what was about to happen. This was no longer just personal validation. This was symbolic. A statement against every voice that ever measured her potential by her starting point. Doubt made a final attempt. It appeared not as fear but as overthinking. Second-guessing decisions that had already proven effective. Wondering if slowing down might protect what she'd built. The queen recognized this for what it was. Fear of arrival. Fear of what success would demand next. She did not retreat. Instead she recommitted. The final push required sharper focus than any stage before. Margins were slim. Timing mattered. She waited when patience was needed. Acted swiftly when opportunity appeared. This balance between restraint and decisiveness marked her full evolution. Then came the test. A moment where everything aligned, or would fall apart. A convergence of timing, preparation, and risk. The queen moved forward without hesitation. Not recklessly but resolutely. She trusted the work she had done. The hours invested. The discipline earned. The return did not arrive instantly. Time stretched. Silence returned briefly. But this silence felt different. It felt charged. The kind of stillness that precedes impact. When the numbers updated, the queen paused. Not to celebrate. To breathe. Because the figure staring back at her was not just money. It was confirmation. Validation. Vindication. The system had held. The pressure had not broken it. The queen had not broken either. She stood on the edge now. One final step away from the number that once felt impossible. The journey from $1 to 4 digits was no longer theoretical. It was imminent. As this chapter ends, understand this. The crown does not arrive with fireworks. It arrives with clarity. With calm. With the quiet knowledge that you are standing in proof. Chapter 5 will begin at the moment of arrival, where the number becomes a message and the queen rises fully into her dominion. Chapter 5 begins not with celebration but with stillness. The kind of stillness that follows a long storm when the sky hasn't fully cleared, but the danger has passed. The queen did not rush to announce anything. She did not post, boast, or perform triumph. She sat with the moment because she understood something crucial. Arrival is sacred, and sacred things deserve silence before noise. The number was real. Not imagined. Not projected. Not hoped for. $1,000 stood where $1 once lived. The distance between them was not luck, not shortcuts, not charity. It was discipline stretched across time. It was patience sharpened into strategy. It was belief trained to survive doubt without breaking. The queen reflected not on the money, but on who she had become while earning it. She was no longer the person who hesitated before starting. No longer the person who waited for perfect conditions. No longer the person who believed resources determined worth. The journey had carved something permanent into her identity: self-trust. That trust was the real prize. The $1,000 did not signal an ending. It signaled a beginning at a higher altitude. Because once proof exists, it cannot be unseen. The queen now knew that systems could be built from nothing, that momentum could be created from scarcity, and that focus could turn crumbs into currency. The world still looked the same outside. Streets unchanged. Responsibilities still present. But internally the terrain had shifted. The queen carried herself differently. Not arrogantly. Vaguely. There is a subtle confidence that comes from having evidence instead of hope. This proof was portable. No one could take it away. Even if the money disappeared tomorrow, the knowledge remained. The discipline remained. The mindset remained. And that made the $1,000 infinitely reproducible. The queen reviewed the journey carefully. Each phase had demanded a different version of her. The beginner required courage. The builder required patience. The accelerator required restraint. The finisher required faith. She had met each demand without abandoning herself. That is dominion. The meaning of the journey expanded beyond personal success. This was now a counter-narrative. A quiet rebellion against low expectations. Against the myth that beginnings define endings. Against the lie that power must be inherited instead of built. The queen understood that many would never hear the full story. They would only see the result and misunderstand it. They would call it simple. They would call it obvious. They would call it lucky. But she knew the truth. Discipline looks obvious only after it works. She did not rush to scale recklessly. She did not burn the proof for applause. She treated the $1,000 with the same respect she had treated the one. Because scale without discipline is collapse in disguise. Instead she planned. The next systems. The next level. The next proof. Because dominion is not a moment. It is a practice. And queens do not stop building when they win. They build so others can see what's possible. This journey was never about money alone. Money was simply the scoreboard. The real victory was mastery over fear, distraction, and doubt. The queen had learned how to move intentionally in a world designed to exhaust and confuse her. She had learned how to start small without thinking small. As this final chapter closes, understand this. The crown was never handed over. It was forged. Quietly. Fully. Relentlessly. And once forged, it could never be revoked. From $1 to 1,000 was not the miracle. The miracle was the woman who rose in between. This is Black Queen Dominion. Where beginnings don't limit destiny, proof silences doubt, and when the queen rises she stays risen. Crown.